everyone for joining us. We can go ahead and get started. I'm Sarah Luongo. I am the Associate Director for UVA Clubs and Global Engagement. I work primarily with signature programming and all of you wonderful club leaders across the world. And I am joined today with my colleague, Ashley. Ashley, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Ashley Privet. I am the Senior Director for People Operations here in UVA in the Advancement Office. And that means that I support our internal staff with training and tools so they can be successful. I also have spent my entire career in advancement, and prior to working at UVA, I was the director of the Alumni Association at JMU for 11 years, and so worked directly with awesome alumni volunteers like yourselves and in our clubs program. And I'm excited to share some ideas with you guys today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashley, for being here with us. And today we're here to talk about, this has been so widely asked for, so in-person, virtual, or hybrid events. Ashley and I are just like you and have been navigating this space for the last 18 months, and we are excited to share with you kind of some of our findings. So today we're going to quickly go over setting goals for events and an overview of in-person, virtual, and hybrid events. And then together we're going to have some hands-on brainstorming, and we're going to look at some events and what that could look like together. So we are just excited to dive in. So Ashley?
Sure. So as you're starting to think about your event, we would encourage you to think about the goals for the event. And one of the things that I did when I was at JMU was to sort of put a model in place. So it was kind of like a learning model. So if you've ever had to write learning objectives, maybe if you're a teacher or something like that in your real life, you might have to think about what do you want people to learn, think, and do as a result of the class that you're teaching. So we sort of took that and changed it a little bit to what do you want people to learn, think, and feel as a result of coming to your event. So when they come to the event, what do you want them to learn about? Are you going to be presenting on a topic that you want them to take away some information about? What do you want them to think about UVA or think about your club or about alumni in general? And then how do you want them to feel while they're there? And I think that's probably, to me, the most important part. Do you want them to feel nostalgic? Do you want them to feel spirited? Do you want them to feel inspired? And so then that will really help sort of set you up for planning the logistics of your goal first. So I would definitely start here, learn, think, and feel.
So we thought we'd take kind of an example that's going on right now, just to kind of put this framework into practice. And then the example is Who's Here, formerly known as Welcome to the City. So one of the goals of Who's Here is to connect or reconnect new, returning, or longtime Who's with their local UVA community. And you all are so great at that. So, when we set a goal and then we have that, and then we start to think, okay, so how do you each want to put your unique touch on that? And now we have more tools than ever to help think about how we want what that experience to look like. And then also applying the great framework that Ashley shared is, when they're at that event, what do we want them to learn, think, and feel? Do we want them to learn about the city, learn about UVA clubs? Do we want them to be a volunteer? Do we want to get them excited? Do we want to, encourage action? So based on what you decide and talk about with your boards, that will help you determine. Sorry, my slides are not advancing. That'll help you think about what is best. So here we are, we're questioning, is in-person best to achieve that goal? Is virtual best? Or is the new hybrid model the best option? So now Ashley and I are going to take you into some of the strengths and considerations for each of those formats.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So each of these formats do have benefits, definitely, but they also have some limitations. And I wouldn't say that any is better than the other. And that's probably the struggle, right? As you're looking at these and thinking, well, there's good stuff about in-person events and there's good stuff about virtual events. And we hope there's good stuff about hybrid events. We haven't tested as many, but as you're thinking about your event, here's some considerations for you. So some of the benefits of in-person events, if we can all think about the before times, when we used to go to in-person events and in the name of UVA and hang out together, some really exciting things happen in an in-person event. There's that connection amongst the people who are there. You're bumping into people in line for food or for a drink. You're sitting down at a table with folks that maybe you knew when you were in school or you saw at the last chapter event. So there is that connection. There's a sort of energy that happens in an in-person event that creates this momentum and excitement. And so if you think about things like a tailgate, that's an event that might be hard to do virtually because there is this sort of excitement about the game ahead and getting excited for UVA to win and, everyone collectively cheering on the same group. So there is this momentum and energy that happens in an in-person event. And then lastly, it's that impromptu connection. So I talked about bumping into people. It is way harder to bump into people virtually. It's possible. There's some possibilities virtually to do some events where you can bump into people, but at an in-person event, this is happening all the time. You're going to meet someone new that you didn't expect to meet just by virtue of proximity. So you're standing next to them, you're sitting next to them, and you're going to get a chance to chat and meet someone new. Of course, some of the things that you might want to consider, we always want you to be careful and think about the safety precautions for your particular area. So, your area, according to CDC, you may want to think about changing up how you're doing things based on what's happening in your area as with the COVID issue. We also want to think about sort of the divided attention of guests. So if you guys have ever been to a tailgate, which I assume you have, it's really hard to get the attention of the people in the space. And that's usually because people are having fun and chatting. And so divided attention can be a real challenge at an in-person event. And so that's just something to think about. Do you need people's real attention? And maybe if you do, an in-person event isn't the right thing for you. One other consideration, of course, is the speaker and guest availability. We have to actually get someone to the event. So, that depends on whether President Ryan is going to be in your town at that point, or if a professor is going to your town for a meeting, and maybe we can also have a club event. So having that speaker and guest availability is important. Sarah was even telling me about a couple times where they've had to cancel events in the past because weather impacted your speaker availability. So maybe someone's flight was delayed or whatever might happen that prevents them from getting to your event. And then a couple of things just about space. Space costs money. So usually an in-person event costs to reserve the space for setup, et cetera. And then that physical limitation of the spaces. So you can't, on the fly, change a space from being able to hold 100 people to being able to hold 200 people just because people are excited. And so that definitely is a limitation. And then lastly is just that access. So is it a place where you can park? Can you get downtown at that point of time? Is it easy to get to? Is it someplace that people know how to get to, et cetera? So those are just some things that you think about as you're thinking about an in-person event. And then Sarah, why don't you give us some examples about what the survey says people are looking for?
Yes, so a couple of our clubs, I'm not sure if anyone on the call here has had this with their club, but some have done surveys to see what programming their constituents in their area are interested in, and also what programming, what types of virtual or in-person programming they're interested in. So based on some of the different club results and based on our own experience with the office over the past 18 months, some of the things that came up in that survey that were requested for primarily in-person were game watches, outdoor activities such as hiking, cleanups, and picnics, wine tastings and local food tours, happy hours, and holiday events. And you can kind of see that these are more those pure social play access, types of events. So to keep that in mind as you're planning, and again, this isn't, this is the exact formula for picking if an event can be in person. It really depends on the goal of the event that you are wanting to have and that experience. What do you want your guests to learn, think, and feel?
Absolutely. So thinking about virtual events, you might notice that some of the things that were previously limitations are now benefits. And some of the things that were benefits are limitations. And so a few things to think about, it is really cost effective to have a virtual event. You didn't have to rent space or tablecloths or tables or any of those kinds of things. Although there is a cost to a virtual event somewhere along the line, usually the webinar services and things like that, but those costs, the webinar services are usually taken care of by UVA, which is great. Typically you can get attendee attention. Now, some people do go off camera and maybe have to attend to something happening at their house, but the reason why they signed up for this event was they were interested in listening to the speaker or whatever the program is. So typically you can get the attention, and they're not chatting usually with someone else at the event. It's super easy to get your guests there because they don't have to travel. So they can just, come from another meeting and be on your webinar as well. Something that you guys have seen, I'm sure, is this broader audience reach, right? So you don't have to worry about just the people who live in your geographic region. You can invite people from across the country. You can partner with other clubs. And so that's really exciting that you can have a lot more people participate that maybe weren't in your geographic region. And the other exciting thing too is that you might be reaching people who previously couldn't come to an event because they have other things to attend to. Maybe they have little kids and finding a babysitter is not really something they want to be doing right now, but they can come to this event because it's virtual. So again, broadening that audience reach is really exciting, and you can accommodate a lot more people. A fun thing just from previously planning events, you always have to have your weather plan. You don't have to have a weather plan for a virtual event, because who cares if it's snowing or raining, because you're in your cozy house and it's easy to attend. So the other fun things about the limitations, or the hard things about limitations, is that sort of energetic and festive space. It is possible, I'm sure, to have a tailgate virtually. There's some elements of a tailgate, I'm sure, that would be really fun to bring to people's homes, but it's not the same energy that maybe it is having it in person. And so that's just something to consider. If that's really important part of your goals, it may be something to consider having an in-person event for. And then that interaction between each other. So you can set up purposeful interaction like we're going to do today with our breakouts. But it's hard to have sort of those impromptu interactions where people bump into each other. There's a couple of pieces of software out there, a couple of companies which allow virtual events where people can sort of move about the room and bump into each other. And so I'm sure Sarah can talk to you about those if that's something you're interested in, but it's not exactly the same as being in the room with everyone. And then, of course, the last part, one of the limitations, is that reliable internet access. And that can be for the participants, or it could also be for the people hosting. There's the nerve-wracking part of the technology all working if you're hosting something virtually. So,
thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ashley. Yeah. So again, with that survey results that came in and our own experiences, we found that people were really asking for faculty and alumni speakers are great for the virtual format, thinking about scheduling and collaborations. We've seen some really neat panels come together, or collaborative club events in the past 18 months. So that's something to think about if you want to broaden your reach. Cooking demonstrations with recipes were also requested. So if you have local alumni who have a niche and they want to cook, or even if they're not your local alumni, now you can bring them in. I'm sorry, the wind, I don't know if you can hear that on my end, but yeah, so it's a great opportunity. And wine tastings were requested as well for virtual. I don't know if you remember, but we also had that listed on the in-person event. So if you think about a wine tasting, if we want to look at the goal of the event, you might get something different in each format. So if you just wanted that pure education, maybe it's best to do it one-on-one and you're in the comfort of your home, or it's the dead of winter, so that's the best time. But if you're looking for more of a social activity, then that could possibly be in person. So there is no one right format to pick for your event. It's really, what do you want that experience to look like? And then lastly, something that came up as well were garden tours, museum tours. We've seen some really neat things come about with some of the behind the scenes programming that came out. We went to an alum's home and he had a bunch of different, I don't want to say antiques, and he walked us through. We've had lots of different things on that respect. And then this was actually this is a prime example of the photo that's on the screen right now. This was a faculty member that gave a talk to California. I think it was Orange County, about Jane Austen. So it was great that she was able to zoom in and provide that for everyone.
Yeah.
Hey,
thanks, Sarah. So hybrid events, of course, is kind of the new frontier as we think about kind of returning back to whatever the new normal is. And everyone hates hearing new normal, but that is kind of where we're heading, right? There's some good stuff about what we learned, while we were in the pandemic about virtual events. And then there's some good stuff about the kinds of events we had before. So how do we take the best of both and have these hybrid events? So they would have an in-person component and then also a virtual component as well. some of the great things about it is it brings in the virtual participation allows us to have a broader audience reach. Anyone can join in no matter where they are, but it also still allows us to have some of those, bump in opportunities when you're in an in-person event. You can bring in your speaker still virtually. So even if you have an in-person component, perhaps you might have the speaker come in virtually, which allows you to have that availability that you might have for a virtual event. It does cost more. So that's something to consider, is that if you're going to do this and do it well, one thing that you might have to consider is, not only are you going to have to book the in-person space, but you might also have to book an AV company to come in and film the event so that it can be live streamed. So that would be an added expense and an added complication to the event. Worthwhile, but just something to think about. And then another thing that's really, really important is thinking about how to make sure that no matter which way you choose to participate, so if you're there in person or you're there virtually, that you have sort of an equitable participation across both of those audiences. And so that can look like a lot of different things. Let's say you were having a smaller event like a book club or a board meeting. Perhaps you might have people in the room be the in-person buddies for people who are virtual, so that they are paying attention to the chat or representing the people who are virtual. Maybe their questions that they might have, they're bringing those to the attention of the speaker. So making sure that no matter which way you participate, you're still going to have a great experience. And so you want to really be thinking about both of those audiences as you plan.
Yeah.
So
yes, so we are navigating this as well. And so some two recent examples, this wasn't just our office, but it was our counterpart. So we had Lifetime Learning, and they host More Than the Score. So that is normally hosted at Alumni Hall before home football games. There's normally a faculty speaker. So they have actually started doing hybrid events, and there are people in Alumni Hall, and then also you can register virtually, and that is streamed in. So, and as Ashley was mentioning earlier, what does equitable participation look like? We do hire, you have to have an AV tech on site. So just looking at those things. And then our colleagues across grounds were expressing that they are now starting to dabble with or venture into board meetings that are hybrid. So having people that are, participating on Zoom and then also in the room, and what does that look like? So as we learn more, we will definitely share what we learn and start doing some of this on our own, but we're here to help if you have any questions and want to start, we're learning right alongside you. So as we said, the new frontier. All right. Okay, so we thought that it would be fun to take what we've learned and kind of think through some scenarios with breakout rooms. We want to make this as much of a learning experience as possible. And so we have 3 different scenarios here, and we'll place you into breakout rooms, and together you can think about how you would want each of these different events to look like, and you can pick whichever you want. So our first one is a wine tasting. I mentioned that had been requested for both in person and virtual. So a local winery wants to do a tasting, and you guys can decide how you want that to look, virtual, hybrid, or in person. And then our next one is a bit more of how to engage young alumni. So we're giving you a bit of a scenario. Your club wants to engage young alums in your area. What kind of gathering would you put on? And then we're going to offer do you have a real life scenario that you just want to workshop with your fellow club leaders right now and offer that up to the room? So lots of options here. Again, there is no right, wrong, it should be this way, it should be that way. It's really your unique event, and you're all so creative. So I'm excited to see what you come up with. So we're gonna open up the rooms now. Ashley and I can bop around to different rooms and see how you're doing. So feel free, you should get a message to join at the bottom of your screen. Hi everyone, welcome back. How did that go? Would anyone like to share what their groups talked about, or any of the ideas or things that they were brainstorming? I know I popped into 2 rooms and everyone was, you all brought what you've been experiencing. So it seemed helpful to get to collaborate in that way. Anyone?
Yeah, this is Lane Craighill from Coastal Carolina. We got a new group, and just hearing from a couple of other people what they're doing, some alternatives to the the wine, and terrific idea to do something with beer tasting, because I think almost all of us live in places that have local brew pubs. And I think Wilmington has 17 of them or something like that. And because the issue we had with wine is if you're tasting 3 wines, you end up with 3 bottles of wine, or 4 if it's 4 bottles of wine. And so you're just capping a lot of stuff. With beer, you can have like a 4-pack of 4 different beers and have the brewer talk about it and have people go by and pick it up. I mean, at a place like Wilmington, that makes a huge amount of sense. So that's a terrific idea.
Oh, I love hearing that. And like you had a great, when I was in your room, we were kind of talking a little bit about wine and in person or virtual, and you made the great reflection that you said that you have a small core group and you really want to build that social connection. So you want to do things in person. So I thought that was such an insightful and great approach.
Yeah. Yep. That's right.
Yeah. Anyone else?
So Sarah, I was in a really great room with several folks, Jonathan, Kendall, and Kim, and they were talking about some of their events. And I think Kendall was saying, that they did a horseback ride, which sounds really fun. They had a nice sized group as well, like 60 folks. And of course that is socially distanced because you are, horse lengths apart at least from people. But that's sort of a creative and different way to do an in-person event. I think there are a lot of good things like breweries and wineries as well that other folks talked about, but horseback riding was sort of creative. So I thought that was really, really cool.
I will say we saw that event come in and everyone in the office, did you see that they're doing horseback riding? How creative, how clever.
Yeah.
But I think that's another great point, Ashley, is we've seen a lot of different events that we might not necessarily have seen before. I've loved seeing, we were having a lot of hikes right now. And I know that came up on an earlier session, talking a bit about the logistics of that. And then lately, I don't know if anyone's here from Atlanta, but I saw that there's a yappy hour happening at a place where you can bring your dog. And then, so it's like, whether you have a dog or not, just come to this place. So I thought that was another great creative event for the times that we're in, or even after. I mean, I don't have a dog, but I would love some puppy therapy, at the end of the day.
That's right. So our group also was talking about the Who's Here events. And I think that Jonathan was planning that Who's Here event in person at a winery. And I think maybe Kendall was planning that same kind of event at a brewery. And we also talked about maybe offering 2 events for the Who's Here. So having a virtual one and an in-person one, just to sort of catch different folks maybe. And yeah, so having an in-person event that has that social component and the feeling that you want, because we were talking about what feeling that is, which is that there is this network of people here and the enormity of the UVA experience and how many people there are out in the world that also had it. And so having that in person has that. But you could also do a virtual version for folks who maybe, aren't into wineries or can't get away. Maybe they have little kids at home or aren't feeling comfortable being in person right now, and provide a networking experience. So you could do a sort of a speed networking event on Zoom where you put people in breakout rooms. We didn't talk about this, but there are other virtual event spaces where you can have events, and we've used them at UVA. There's a company called Gatherly where you can sort of have a map of a space and people can move about the room and bump into each other and have conversations. And so it's a little bit more organic online, if that's such a thing. But there's another group called Gather Round, which does sort of a speed networking and provides questions for people to answer while they're in their speed networking, and then pops them into other groups along the way. So, if those are events that you're interested in hosting, I'm sure Sarah and team can talk with you about those.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always happy to workshop. Ashley, I saw you unmuted.
I did. So I just wanted to say the Gatherly, while initially skeptical about the whole situation, was so much fun. I don't think I've laughed as hard as I laughed in a virtual setting as much as I did during that conference. So I was like, sure, I'll go, I'll participate. But thoroughly enjoyed it. So it's a little bit outside the box. It's a little bit random, but it's absolutely was new enough to make you sort of forget that you're like living through this virtual world. And it's different enough than from Zoom that you feel a separate type of connection. So highly recommended.
Yeah, great.
Thanks.
Yeah, we can definitely explore that. But I really like the idea of doing too, if you have the bandwidth within your club to do that, because you can cast a wider net. Maybe some people come back and that's someone who's interested that might want to volunteer. Share fun gathering. Yes, of course. And then maybe we can work on something behind the scenes as a little pilot for everyone for that. So I'll look into that. I'm going to put that on my task list. So yeah. Any other thoughts or any other questions for Ashley or I, or any other thoughts from your breakout rooms?
Our group talked, and I think I do like the idea of especially with who's here, of offering 2 different ones, because we had an in-person event that was purposely going to be small for a lot of reasons, but I got an email from someone who was unhappy we were doing in person, and then an email from somebody who didn't want to be masked because it was at a theater for a dress rehearsal for a local theater group. And anyway, I think the opportunity for who's here to do the 2 events really kind of, especially in a place like Florida, allows us to kind of find that middle path, because nobody has to do whoever, you can do whatever you feel comfortable doing.
Yeah. I mean, it is double the planning because you do have 2 events to plan, but you will reach a wider audience, and you do give people options based on their comfort level. And then even, let's just take away the COVID thing, just your life in general. I don't have to come downtown or, again, find a babysitter or any of the other barriers that people have sometimes. But some people are like, thank you. I'm glad you're having an in-person event. I'm super excited to meet people in person. So it's great to provide both if you can. But again, that's a bandwidth question.
Speaking about, things kind of coming up, Sarah has lost power in her apartment. So that is why she dipped out unexpectedly. She just called and said, hey, I have no power. So Ashley, I'm obviously not an event planner with UVA, but I do have some experience. So if you have any questions, I work with Sarah a lot. Otherwise, I think, we can wrap up if there's nothing else.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your time today. And it's been really fun to sort of jump back into that alumni relations and engagement space. I always joke that the folks who work in engagement are my favorite. And also getting a chance to actually meet some real life constituents is exciting, because I don't get to do that very often in my job. So we appreciate the work that you guys do in your clubs. We know it's not a small thing. It's a big thing, what you're doing. And so I know we really appreciate that work. And if you have anything that you need, Ashley and Sarah know how to get in touch with me, but they're also super big experts in what they do. So you're in great hands with them. I hope you guys have a great evening and a good weekend.
All right. Thank you very much. Great talking to you guys.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. We'll see you at 5:30 for the roundtables. Thanks, Ashley.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.